Is instantaneous teleportation between planets possible? Chapter 1. The Promise and the Wall. Imagine this. You stand on a dark field at midnight, dew soaking your shoes, breath silver in the cold. Over the eastern horizon, a tiny ember glows Mars, patient and red. You raise your hand, extend your index finger, and cover an entire planet. The distance between you and that faint ember is not a measure you can hold like a length of rope. It is a feeling. It's the ache in your chest when you realize the ember is not a lantern at the end of a path, but a world tens of millions of kilometers away. And then your mind does something deceptively simple. It asks a childlike question with adult consequences. What if I could be there now? Not in 6 months aboard a humming interplanetary freighter. Not in 2 weeks on a nuclear-electric sprint ship. Now, as in before your breath even fogs. The word for that is audacious and precise, instantaneous. No wait, no journey, no arc of time between intent and arrival. Teleportation. Stories have always treated teleportation as a flourish. A blink and you appear somewhere else, unbothered by what just happened to your atoms, to physics, to causality itself. But if you want more than a flourish, if you want a real plan, you must face the one thing stories dodge: the wall. The wall is physics. It's built of ideas older than rockets and newer than lasers, stones set by Maxwell and Einstein, beams welded by Planck and Shannon. On that wall are signs that do not blink. Information is physical. The speed of light is a limit. Measurement disturbs what it measures. Copying quantum stuff perfectly is forbidden. Moving energy around the universe exacts a tax. And the universe cares about causality in a way that is stricter than any customs checkpoint you'll ever meet. To ask, is instantaneous teleportation between planets possible? Is to ask whether there's a hidden door in that wall. The rest of this book is a careful run of the fingers along the mortar, a search for hairline cracks, a confession of all the places the wall held fast, and a surprising catalog of places where our hands came away dusty with possibility. But first, we must agree on what we mean by teleportation, by instantaneous, and by between planets. Teleportation is not just travel. Travel implies a path. You occupy each point along the way, if only in principle, even in a warp bubble fairy tale. Teleportation insists that you do not take the path. You vanish here and appear there. The there is not next door. It is another world, moving through space at its own pace, rotating, wobbling, tugged by the sun and flattered by its moons. The between is not a straight line. It's a thread across a cosmic loom that's itself shifting. Instantaneous is strictly cruel. Zero time between here and there, measured in the frame where you and your destination make your plans. Close to instant is a compromise the universe sometimes tolerates. Instantaneous is a dare. With those terms pinned down, we can begin with the most misunderstood candidate for the job: quantum teleportation. The phrase is a triumph of marketing and a peril to common sense. Quantum teleportation is real. It's done in labs. It's even done over long distances across cities and, once, between ground and orbit. But it does not beam objects. It moves quantum states. The fragile, probabilistic dress code that tells a particle what counts as who I am when measured. The procedure depends on entanglement, the uncanny connection between particles that embarrasses any simple notion of separateness. Create a pair of entangled qubits, send one to Mars the slow, old-fashioned way, keep one on Earth. Later, To teleport an unknown quantum state from Earth to Mars, you combine the Earth qubit with the system you care about, perform a special measurement, and then, crucially, send 2 classical bits over a regular channel to tell Mars how to complete the reconstruction. Without those bits, the thing on Mars is just a scrambled possibility cloud. With them, it snaps into the original pattern. Here are the 2 laws that stop quantum teleportation from being instantaneous travel between planets. First, the no-signaling theorem. Entanglement cannot transmit usable information faster than light. None. 0. The classical bits needed to complete the trick are prisoners of the speed limit. Second, the no-cloning theorem. You cannot make an exact copy of an unknown quantum state. Quantum teleportation works by destroying the original. It is, in a merciless sense, a transfer, not a duplication. So when someone tells you we already do teleportation, smile and agree because it's true and beautiful, but notice that it faithfully carries the banner of nature's restraint. It teleports states, not matter, and it refuses to break the speed limit. Fine, you say. Let's teleport me as information. After all, you are not a statue, but a pattern. Cells, proteins, charges, fields, a nervous system whose moment-to-moment identity is a dynamic composition. The idea is to scan you to such exquisite precision that the entire specification can be transmitted, then, at the destination, reassemble an equivalent you from local atoms. No starship required. Just a scanner, a transmitter, a receiver, and a factory capable of ultrafine assembly. Think of it as the world's most severe 3D printer, with bio and quantum ink. If this sounds like science fiction's most controversial parlor trick, that's because it is. Let's set aside, just for a page or two, the existential question of whether the person who steps out on Mars is you or a meticulous imposter. Let's focus on the logistics. How much information is in you? It depends on how ruthlessly you compress. At the coarsest useful scale, say, listing which cell types are where and how they connect, you might imagine a number like 10, 15, 10, 15, 2, 10, 17, 10, 17 bits, sufficing to describe tissues, connectomes, and chemical gradients. At the finest conceivable scale, specifying every elementary particle's quantum state, you crash into a fog of impossibility. Quantum mechanics tells us that many properties simply cannot be simultaneously specified to arbitrary precision. Try to scan them perfectly, and your act of measuring will tip the apple cart, distorting the very thing you seek to copy. Even if you compromise and scan at a level that keeps the pattern of you intact, whatever intact means, you must send those bits to the destination. And that means time. Signals travel at or below the speed of light. Mars may be close, say, 55 million kilometers at a favorable opposition, or cruelly far over 400 million kilometers. The one-way light time ranges from roughly 3 minutes to over 20. Teleportation as a network service would have a variable latency that depends on the ephemerides of worlds. That is not instantaneous. It's a clever courier. There is also the Landauer limit, a principle that whispers in the wiring. Erasing information, clearing a bit from unknown to known, costs energy and produces heat at a rate bound up with temperature and Boltzmann's constant. When you manipulate staggering numbers of bits, the energy bookkeeping matters. And when you build the receiver on Mars, A factory able to assemble a human from local elements must obey the second law of thermodynamics. The heat dumps and entropy budgets must go somewhere. But the most serious problem with informational teleportation is not engineering, it's causality. If you could somehow deliver the entire specification to Mars with zero delay, you would have sent information faster than light. And the universe, as described by special relativity, is allergic to that possibility. FTL communication is not just fast, it's destructive to the logic of cause and effect. In some frames of reference, your arrival would precede your departure. You could send a warning that prevents itself. From such loops, paradoxes bloom and physical law wilts. The cosmos seems built to avoid them. Then we cheat, you say, a grin rising. We do not send information, we bend space. Now you are speaking the language of wormholes and warp metrics. A wormhole is a solution to Einstein's equations that connects two distant regions of space-time by a throat, like a tunnel whose interior is not part of ordinary space. If you could step into the mouth near Earth and out a mouth near Mars, you would not have traveled through the intervening space at all. Trip time could be seconds. Measured by an outside observer, you might appear to have outrun a beam of light that had to plod across ordinary space. If you can arrange the geometry so that the two mouths sit stably near the two planets, you've built a bridge. Instantaneous? In local time for the traveler, yes. But there are catches so sharp they draw blood. Wormholes that you can traverse a human can walk through without being shredded are not like the original Einstein-Rosen bridges, which pinch off too quickly to allow passage. The traversable kind require exotic matter with negative energy density to hold the throat open. Negative energy is not fiction. Quantum field theory allows small amounts in special circumstances, the Casimir effect between conducting plates, for instance. But assembling and arranging a macroscopic, engineered distribution of negative energy that can prop a wormhole open is far beyond our current toolbox. Worse, quantum inequalities seem to limit how much negative energy you can have and for how long, like a stern banker capping your overdraft. Try to gather more, and the universe claws it back. Even if you possess the exotic matter, your wormhole must be stable under fluctuations and protected against vacuum polarization effects that could flood it with radiation and collapse it. It must be anchored to bodies that themselves move. It must not drift or twist under tidal forces. It must be kept free of timelines that close on themselves, closed time-like curves, a possibility that leads to the very causal tragedies we're trying to avoid. Stephen Hawking famously proposed a chronology protection conjecture, the conjecture that quantum effects conspire to prevent time machines from forming. Some analyses suggest that attempts to manipulate wormhole mouths into time machines lead to stress energy explosions that destroy the arrangement. In essence, if you try to trick causality, causality tricks you back with infinities. There is also the indignity of the addressing problem. A wormhole mouth anchored near a planet must track the planet's rotation, its orbital motion, the influence of other bodies, and the curvature of space-time in a gravitational well. If your exit mouth is kilometers above Mars on Monday, it may be deep underground by Friday if you've not properly slaved its motion. Anchoring the mouth to the local gravitational potential and maintaining a particular inertial frame requires engineering that makes orbital mechanics look like juggling apples. Still, if you could solve all of that, if you could thread a wormhole throat between two worlds and keep it snug, You might allow something that counts as functionally instantaneous for the traveler, even if the global bookkeeping insists the speed limit remains unbroken. That "if" is the size of a small galaxy. But unlike entanglement-based teleportation, wormholes at least attack the problem from a different angle. They try to change the topology of the playing field rather than run faster on it. The warp drive belongs to the same family of audacity. The Alcubierre solution imagines a bubble of space-time that contracts in front of a ship and expands behind it, moving the bubble faster than light relative to distant observers, while the ship itself never locally exceeds light speed, like a conveyor belt installed in the metric itself. It sounds like a loophole you would be a fool not to use, but it shares wormholes' appetites and allergies. It has an insatiable craving for negative energy. Its leading edge forms a horizon that isolates the inside from the outside, making steering and stopping a problem. Quantum effects near that horizon may bathe the interior in lethal radiation, and forming or collapsing the bubble seems to require signals that themselves must obey the speed limit, undermining the practical utility. Warp is a cousin of the wormhole, a thought experiment that lights the mind and bruises the math. If these are the glamorous candidates, there is another that looks dull, until you realize it's the one our civilization is actually building: networks. If you ring a solar system with quantum repeaters that distribute entanglement between node stations in orbit around Earth and Mars, say you can make high-fidelity quantum links, combine these with codebooks, ultra-fast lasers, and error-correcting schemes that laugh at noise, and you get something powerful. Telepresence without travel. The body stays here, senses and agency are projected there. To skeptics, this is not teleportation at all, but to the traveler, it may be indistinguishable from being there, and it stays friendly with causality. All classical coordination chugs along at light speed. No paradoxes are born. Let us step back and ask the strict question again, with all our new nuance. Is instantaneous teleportation, as in zero-time change of location between planets, possible? Under the physics we have tested to exhaustion, the answer is no if it entails sending information faster than light. The wall holds. It is not a wall of mere inconvenience, but of conceptual survival. Break it, and cause and effect unravel. Under speculative physics, the answer becomes maybe in a sense that is easily mistaken for yes. If traversable wormholes exist, if they can be engineered and stabilized without provoking time loops or quantum meltdowns, if suitable negative energy arrangements can be created and controlled, then a person can pass from Earth to Mars in a time so short that instant does not feel like an exaggeration. But notice that even here we must be careful. The traveler's itinerary is instant because she does not traverse ordinary space. She walks through the throat. The universe, outside the tunnel, still respects the speed limit. And building the tunnel is a project of such baroque difficulty that we cannot honestly promise it even to our grandchildren's grandchildren. There is one more path, quiet and philosophical, that sneaks in under the door of semantics. You can change what you mean by you. If you are a pattern that can be instantiated in two places, and if continuity of subjective experience can be preserved or convincingly simulated, then you might argue that being awake on Mars after a destructive scan on Earth is teleportation. If the entire process is orchestrated so that you go to sleep in one world and wake in another with no experienced interval, then, from the inside, it was instantaneous. The wall, the signal delay was suffered by the data while you were not there to count it. In practice, though, we run into the same guardrails. The data that instantiates you must travel through space slower than light. The machine on Mars cannot wake you until it has what it needs. And the metaphysics are you remain a cultural debate, not a scientific theorem. So where does this leave the midnight field and the ember on your fingertip? It leaves you with a paradox that is not a contradiction. The universe is both generous and severe. It allows connections more intimate than anyone expected, entanglement. It allows geometry to be strange wormholes, warp metrics in the chalkboard's imagination. It allows patterns to matter as much as particles, but it refuses quite calmly to let you send a usable message into your own past. It refuses to let you skip the tax of the lifetime between worlds. You might be tempted to curse that refusal as small-minded, as if the cosmos were a bureaucrat. Resist the temptation. The refusal is the very thing that makes stories possible. If cause did not precede effect, if journeys had no delay, then suspense would die. The fact that Mars is minutes away even for light is precisely what makes a hand extended toward it mean something. And yet, we are a species that uses doors for which keys do not yet exist. We ride ideas hard until they show us where they will not go. Then we polish what remains into tools. The irreducible delay between worlds, that becomes a cadence for conversation. You speak, you wait, you listen. The impossibility of beaming bodies, that becomes an impetus to master bodies that can survive ships. The stubbornness of geometry, that becomes a laboratory for cleverness. We shape fields into sails, ride gravitational assists like thieves using lantern shadows, design trajectories with the delicacy of lace. We can already see the opening steps of a civilization that implements the closest possible thing to instant. Picture an interplanetary quantum internet. Constellations of satellites lofted into elliptical orbits that give them long dwell times over their worlds of service. High-altitude platforms over Mars that gulp photons from Earth with adaptive optic systems that deform their mirrors like living eyes. Cryogenic nodes that hold entanglement long enough to knit together links, swapping and purifying them, just as 19th century telegraph operators once swapped and purified messages by hand. In parallel, an avatar industry grows. Vehicles in the dusty streets of Jezero, in the brine tunnels beneath Europa's ice, in the methane fogs of Titan bodies of metal, polymer, and carbon lattice that can host a human mind's will. The operator sits in a quiet room in Da Nang, Lagos, or Reykjavik, fingers resting on haptics that push back with the texture of alien gravel, eyes swimming in a visor that delivers the tint of a foreign sun, ears filled with latency-compensated sound. When the light time is 3 minutes, the system learns to predictively assist. It models your intention, fills the gap, defers final authority. Between worlds, you and your proxy become a duet. It is not teleportation, but it is close enough to make you forget the distinction, the way a high-speed train is not flying, but your senses forgive it. Still, you say, because you are not done. Still, is there any trick we have not tried? There are speculative corners of theory where the wall flickers. Some physicists wonder whether foam-like space-time at the Planck scale could be coaxed into macroscopic tunnels. Others ask whether certain cosmological backgrounds, with their peculiar expansions and contractions, could permit causality shortcuts that do not snowball into paradox. There are whispers, usually more poetry than prediction, about ER equals EPR, a conjectured link between entanglement, EPR, and wormholes, ER, as if maximally entangled systems might be thought of as connected by non-traversable bridges. Could some engineered maneuver promote a non-traversable bridge into a traversable one without blowing up the bookkeeping? The stern answer so far is no. The bookkeeping bites, but the fact that the question is sensible is already astonishing. Meanwhile, the practical world refuses to wait for perfect metaphysics. Imagine matter relay depots, factories on Mars that stockpile generic atoms, sorted and clean, and machines that can assemble human-grade biochemistry out of that stock. Add to this a culture unafraid to sharpen its definition of self, and a legal regime wise enough to regulate the practice without stamping it flat. The first teleportations would be objects of violins sent across space as a pattern and grown at the destination. Then tissues, retinas, livers transported as recipes, printed and matured. Then organisms less burdened by the identity puzzle. And finally, a first-person leap. A person says, "I will go," and a machine answers, "Then sleep." At that moment, the question, "Is instantaneous teleportation possible?" would be rephrased in an unexpectedly intimate way. Not, "Can the universe be compelled?" but "What do we consent to call arrival?" If a woman falls asleep under an Earth sky and opens her eyes under a Mars sky, with no dream in between, with continuity so smooth she cannot wedge a sheet of paper into the seam, has she not for herself moved instantly? The wall is still there, out in the wires and lasers, in the photonic streams that took minutes to arrange her rebirth, but she was not there to see it. From her point of view, there was no wait. Some will call this a cheat. Others will call it a definition adequate for a civilization that refuses to be caged by neighborhoods but keeps faith with causes and effects. So much for philosophy. Before we close this first chapter, let us tighten what we have scattered. Quantum teleportation is real, but cannot send usable information faster than light, and does not beam matter. It obeys the wall and shows us how rigorous nature is about it. Informational teleportation of a person reduces the body to a specification, transmits it, and reconstitutes it. It cannot be instantaneous in any global sense because signals take time. It also drags identity questions into the bright light and dares us to define what we mean by same. Wormholes and warp metrics are the boldest loopholes in the chalk dust, promising traveler-experienced instants at terrifying engineering costs and with booby traps set by stability, energy conditions, and chronology. Networks and avatars are not cheats, but honest heirs to the laws we have. They transform the experience of distance without picking a fight with causality. Semantics matter. For a subjective mind, a carefully arranged blackout between scan and wake can feel like an instant, even if the universe outside keeps slow, loyal time. The wall did not collapse under our first push, but it did something worth more. It revealed its texture. In that texture are places you can grip. In the chapters that follow, we will grip harder. We'll count energies with open eyes, budget bits like bankers, chase negative energy through Casimir caverns, and test what you must retain to remain yourself. And we will find this is a promise that the universe's refusal to give us instantaneous teleportation is not a cruelty, but an invitation. It asks us to be cunning, to be patient, to ask better questions. Tonight, you still stand in the field. Mars still fits under your fingertip. You lower your hand and laugh, because now you see two truths at once. You cannot be there now, and you might live to see ways of being there that make now a small concession. The ember hangs. The dew soaks your shoes. Tomorrow, you will begin to build. And when the first door opens, not a miracle door that breaks the world, but a lawful door that honors it, you will step through. And on some future night, a person on Mars will stand on a basalt plain, raise a gloved hand to the black, and cover a sapphire with a fingertip. They will ask the same childlike question. And then, as we will discover, they will answer it better. Chapter 2. The road to almost now. On the second night, you return to the same field. The dew is still faithful. The ember of Mars has moved a finger's width, and the moon has tilted its lamp to a new angle, as if to tell you that nothing you care about holds still. You breathe, and the breath is not a metaphor. It's the rhythm of a mammal thinking in the dark. The question remains, bright and stubborn. Is instantaneous teleportation between planets possible? The first chapter carved the wall. Tonight is for building. Not a fantasy door that violates the wall, but a human door that honors it and still gets you through. We begin with a deceptively humble principle, a sentence so plain you might miss its rebellion. Experience is elastic. You can change how time feels without changing time itself. For a traveler, the difference between now and almost now is not a number on a clock, but a quality of being. What we will construct is not a loophole. It is a discipline, a civilization spanning choreography of physics, code, logistics, ethics, and language. If instantaneous teleportation is forbidden, then we will become the kind of species for whom waiting is so well managed that it becomes effectively invisible. This chapter is a blueprint. It has 5 halls: sensing, self, substrate, systems, and story. By the end, we will have something that serves the original hunger and keeps faith with the universe. Sensing, the world arrives first. Before a person goes anywhere, their senses scout. Vision is a courier. Touch is diplomacy. Sound is the rumor of a place made intimate. The first practical door between planets is therefore a sensory door. Picture an interplanetary optical backbone. On Earth, arrays of telescopes with adaptive optics, their mirrors rippling like water under actuators, stitch star twinkle into stability. In Mars orbit, mirror-sailed relay craft hang on aerostationary arcs, staring down through dust to surface stations at dusk when the air is least unruly. Each node is a listener more than a shouter, its detectors chilled close to absolute zero to quiet their own noise. These nodes do not promise miracles. They promise consistency. Photons will take minutes to cross, but they will arrive reliably, intact, corrected by algorithms trained on turbulence, like a pilot trained on weather. Now bind the backbone with quantum repeaters. They are not FTL. They are not magic. Their value is in quality, not speed. Entangled pairs are distributed, measured, purified across noisy links until the network's correlations are strong enough to support quantum key distribution, tamper-evident links, and, one day, quantum sensor arrays that treat planets as synthetic apertures, 2 ears so far apart that the universe itself is the head between them. Your raw senses, extended by machines, gain a binocular cosmos. Why begin with senses? Because presence begins there. You do not need your body on Mars to feel the weight of its light. First, we make it possible to see Mars so well and touch it by proxy so faithfully that your nervous system stops arguing. If teleportation proper is years away, this sensory braid is next month's work. We've already woven miles of it, and with sensing comes humility. The first truth of any expedition is that the destination talks back. A planet is not a stage, it is a partner. When your backbone shivers under a dust storm, you learn. When the sun flares, the network flinches and recovers. Teleportation as experience is not a button but a relationship. I. Self. What must cross? The hardest thing to teleport is not mass, it is meaning. A rock can be specified to a tolerance with cold indifference. A human cannot, unless we decide together what about a human must be preserved for the human to be herself. This is not an invitation to metaphysical fog, it is engineering. Every engineering project begins with tolerances. Identity tolerances are the most intimate tolerances a species will ever set. Start with a sketch. You are a living system with several layers of persistence. There is the genomic layer, slow to change, brutally precise. There is the anatomical layer, organs and tissues in their places, form following function. There is the connectomic layer, the wiring of your nervous system. There is the neurodynamic layer, patterns of firing that are not just wiring, but state. There is the biochemical state, hormones, neuromodulators, the moods of the body. There is the autobiographical layer, memories, skills, traumas, loves. And there is the narrative layer, the ongoing self-story that weaves all the others into I. Total teleportation would capture all layers at maximal fidelity, but totality is a trap. We cannot measure quantum states without disturbing them. We cannot specify every molecule without drowning in description. So, we ask a humane question. What fidelity is sufficient for the person who arrives to be the person who departed by her own standards? You might reject any break in continuity. Nothing less than an unbroken stream of consciousness will do. For you, teleportation reduces to moving your body instantaneously or not at all. Then, tonight's chapter is a map to better ships and better patience. Your standard is stern and honorable. Another person might say, if the body that wakes on Mars has my memories, my temperament, my quirks and scars, if she loves who I love and hates my enemies, if she can play the piano as badly as I do and remembers the night my father died, then she is me. The blackout between scan and wake is acceptable. Like anesthesia, for that person, teleportation as pattern becomes morally imaginable. It demands rituals, law, and trust, but it is within the species' reach. Between the extremes lies a continuum of acceptable fidelity. This continuum will not be settled by physics alone. It will be set by cultures, by courts, by personal vows, by a civic patience for difference. Teleportation's possibility hinges as much on our social contract as on entanglement. This is not a dodge. It is the hinge of the whole project. Technology can deliver capability. Only collective decision can render capability legitimate. Before the first human is teleported as pattern, there will be years of sending simpler selves. Pets, organoids, engineered organisms with measurable behaviors. There will be testaments drafted, new kinds of consent, new words for the pause between scan and wake. And there will be the first people to go pioneers with brave thresholds. 3. Substrate, the stuff of doors. Assuming we accept some notion of self as pattern, we must still confront the substrate, the scanners, the transmitters, and the assemblers. The romance of teleportation lives or dies on the quality of the mundane. Scanners. A myth holds that scanning a human is the same problem as scanning a city. Throw higher resolution at it, and you will eventually see enough. But living matter resists simple cataloging. It is alive by virtue of process, not just structure. A faithful scan needs to capture not only where molecules are, but how they move. Not only which synapses exist, but how they weigh inputs at this very moment. Not only DNA, but which genes are on. The good news is that biology is generous with redundancy. Not every molecule matters to identity. Not every ion channel state must be frozen. There are equivalence classes of states that produce the same conscious dynamics. Just as many different microstates produce the same macroscopic temperature. The art is to overscan without cruelty and to infer without arrogance. In practice, the first scanners will be hybrid. Macro-scale imaging, MRI descendants, hyperspectral tomography, elastography, will map tissues non-destructively. Micro-scale techniques will be destructive thin-slice sectioning, molecular tagging applied to lab-grown twins to learn correspondences between what the big machines can see and what the small knives can learn. Over decades, the destructive approaches shrink to needle biopsies. Inference engines, trained on millions of paired scans, begin to predict the detailed state from the macro signatures with high confidence. We enter the era where a person can be pre-scanned, not at death, but routinely building a versioned, encrypted specification of their body and brain that is updated like a passport. The teleport event itself becomes a delta update, not a from-scratch novel. Transmitters. If we cannot outrun light, we can sharpen the channel. The classical bits describing the delta will be packaged with ruthless source coding, compressed by models that understand people. Error-correcting codes will blanket them. Transmission will be multiplexed over optical links and tight beam radio, riding redundant paths whose outages are statistically independent. For quantum-secured control planes, entangled keys ensure that tampering leaves fingerprints. No FTL here, just engineering that refuses to lose a bit. Assemblers. Teleportation fails if the destination cannot build. The assembler is the least cinematic and most sacramental device in the chain, a cathedral of fabrication. Some parts will be bioreactors that grow tissues scaffolded by decellularized matrices, vascular printers laying capillaries smaller than hairs, immune tutors that educate the new body's defenses using libraries pre-learned from the original. Other parts will be robotic and chemical reactors that make lipids and neurotransmitters on demand, crystal farms that grow appetitic bone, polymer extruders comfortable with proteins. The assemblers do not need to conjure matter. They need feedstock, clean water, carbon, nitrogen, trace metals. A thriving Mars will be a world of feedstock, refineries that make the Earth's alphabet out of rust, ice, and sunlight. You might balk here. The scale seems obscene. But we already reconstitute lives every day with less fanfare. We transplant hearts. We regrow skin over burned children. We temper immune systems with precise poisons. We restore hearing with silicon that whispers to nerves. The assembler is only a completion of a trajectory we are already on, the point at which medicine ceases to be repair and becomes reconstruction. A hidden ally at this scale is time dilation of detail. The whole person need not be printed at once. Many parts, bones, hair, organs with low turnover can be built while the person's specification is still en route. The last, most dynamic deltas, neurodynamic states, endocrine moods are applied near the end. Teleportation turns into a staged symphony, a slow, patient orchestra that bursts into a final, decisive cadence when the last bits arrive. And then there is heat. Landauer's whisper reminds us that erasing bits costs energy. Assembling a body from feedstocks consumes exergy and produces waste. The assembler is therefore a thermal creature. On Mars, heat is both problem and gift. Waste warms domes. Chill nights serve as heat sinks. The teleporter, like any honest machine, must be housed in an architecture that loves its physics. Thick radiators sing with infrared. Seasonal thermal storage smooths peaks. Power is scheduled like prayer. IV. Systems. The civilization that makes it work. Teleportation is not a device. It is a system of systems with a governance that avoids making monsters. Let me tell you a story, not as prophecy, but as a rehearsal. It is the 2070 seconds. You are 60. Your work has taken you through 3 continents and a dozen careers, because by then, careers are agile and stackable. You have the option to go to Mars and not specks on a sky Mars, but the lived, argued, sung Mars. A place with cuisines with names and a politics with factions you dislike. The voyage by ship is safe, slow, beautiful. You have time, but your mother does not, and you will not miss the time she has left. You book a pattern passage. 2 years before your date, you enroll in a continuity registry, a legal framework older than you. One part of it is grimly practical. It defines the you that will wake elsewhere as the same legal person who slept here. It specifies what obligations ride with you. It defines crimes no one has ever had to name before, like pattern tampering and fork without consent. Another part is a set of rituals, testimonies by friends, interviews by clinicians who are not functionaries but witnesses, letters from your own earlier selves, sealed to be opened by the person who will wake. Your body passport, that version scan, has been maintained for 10 years. You opt into an update, a new, minimally invasive micro-MRI that reads your myelin architecture with shocking clarity, a blood panel that infers your endocrine signatures, a night of sleep in a helmet that samples your slow-wave rhythms. Your scanner does not try to steal your soul. It tries to infer the state space of your being with enough fidelity that you will recognize yourself. At the same time, the Mars Foundry accepts a work order. It pre-builds what it can. It grows cartilage. It prints the alveolar scaffolds of lungs and keeps them perfused with artificial hemoglobin to keep them ready. It grows a microbiome in an ecosystem of vats, bacteria, phages, modest eukaryotes, tuned to this epoch's Mars water. It makes an immune system that has read your life, trained on antigens you've met, updated with antigens you'll meet there. The Foundry is a library with a kitchen. On Earth, your final Delta week arrives. The last scan and infer run captures the labile parts, synaptic weights in high-importance regions, neuromodulator distributions inferred by proxies, fragments of short-term memory in echolalia with your personal AI. You spend the evening with your sister. You cry. You are allowed to change your mind at any point. Consent remains consent until the second before you sleep. You lie down. A clinician reads a script she has read to 100 other brave fools. Someone makes a joke. You count backward through a forest of numbers that you and your therapist chose together, numbers that mean home. You sleep in one world. Elsewhere, lead glass doors seal. The foundry warms. The last bits arrive across the backbone. The packet authentication lights a tiny aurora across a status wall, and the assemblers shift from rehearsal to performance. The work is not macabre, it is choreographic. Patterns are not played onto meat. They are coaxed into tissues as those tissues form. The last act is the most delicate, a return to continuity, not as metaphysics, but as control theory. The new body's dynamics are shepherded into a basin of attraction that your dynamics occupied. The awakening protocol is not a switch, it is a shepherd's song. You open your eyes in a room with low red lights and people who know your names. Your throat is rough. Your stomach is sure you haven't eaten. Your legs feel strange, then real. You remember your mother's smile and the numbers in the forest. You cry again because the boundary you crossed was closer than you expected and somehow less dramatic. The clinicians bring you the letters your earlier self wrote. Your sister appears by link, minutes away by light, and you say her name into a microphone that carries it back through photons towards the planet where she stands in dew. Notice what did not happen. No speed limit was broken. No paradox was born. Notice what did. For you, there was no waiting. Between anesthesia and Mars, your time was tight as a fist. This story could be wrong in details. It will be right in one sense if we insist on it. Teleportation worthy of humans will be procedural and tender. It will be framed by law and softened by ceremony. It will not be a consumer gadget. It will be a right. Around it, a security regime must be severe and kind. Patterns are the ultimate PII. Their storage is entropy-hungry and distributed, their access protected by threshold schemes that require multiple human custodians and multiple jurisdictions. Their audit trails immutable and legible to you. There will be a right to erase and a right to refuse duplication. There will be standards for pattern drift that stipulate when updates must be taken to keep the passport honest. There will be doctrines about emergency revival and the most solemn deterrents against abuse. And outside the vaults and clinics, the rest of civilization does its part. Power grids that know how to feed foundries without starving neighborhoods. Education systems that teach children that identity is precious and not trivialized. Art that rehearses the feelings we are about to have so that when they arrive, we are not struck dumb. Story. What we choose to mean, but after the instruments and institutions, a final thing remains that no engineer can deliver. The story we tell about what we have done. If the wall has taught us anything, it is that the universe is not offended if we become wise. It does not punish humility. It rewards it with capacity. The story we choose must be a braid of truth and mercy. First truth, instantaneous teleportation between planets, in the sense of sending usable information faster than light, is not possible. This is not a fad. It is a loyalty to cause and effect that makes all other loyalties possible. If we ever meet a physics that disagrees, it will be a physics that also explains why our universe never allowed its own betrayal. Until then, we will not try to cheat causality, we will court it. Second truth, traveler instant experience is achievable either by bending topology in thought experiment ways we do not command, or, more realistically, by quietly moving the weight out of the traveler's awareness. If you sleep through the light time, then for you the travel was instant. Instantaneity becomes a property of the subjective trajectory, not the signal path. This is not a word game. It is an ethics of time. Third truth. Teleportation as pattern is a decision, not a discovery. The day we accept it will be the day we accept that selves are both stubborn and generous, that we can write our names with a thick pen and still read them. Some will never accept it. They are not wrong. A species is healthiest when it keeps its conservatives and its radicals in creative conversation. The adults in the room will remember that dissent is a guardrail. Mercy. We will go slowly. The first ones to cross will be volunteers with eyes open. Their success will not erase those who prefer ships and sunsets across portholes. The foundries will never be the only doors. Rockets will never be only nostalgia. The word teleportation will not be used as cudgel or as brag. It will be a description of a craft. Let's return to the field one last time. The ember of Mars sits a little lower. You ask the question one more time, not because you expect a different answer, but because good questions deserve to be heard. Is instantaneous teleportation between planets possible? Answer: final and full. Under the laws we have tested under a universe that keeps faith with itself, the answer is no. If instantaneous means sending information faster than light or appearing elsewhere without respecting causality, the wall is real and not cruel. But if instantaneous means no time experienced by the traveler, then the answer is yes in practice. If we redefine the journey as a coordination of scanning, transmitting, and assembling, that hides the weight behind sleep or subjective break. The universe's speed limit remains honored. Your story still makes sense. It is not a loophole. It is a craft. If between planets means bridged by wormholes or warp-changing space-time rather than racing through it, then the answer is maybe in principle and no in practice. For now, the engineering asks too much of negative energy and stability. If one day we learn to hold a throat open without inviting a time machine, the traveler's seconds will feel like miracles. Until then, the chalk sings and the lab demurs, and if possible means socially legitimate, legally safe, ethically sound, and emotionally survivable, then the answer is yes, if we are patient and brave. The door will be built by people who are not dazzled into haste, who write law with tenderness, who design rituals as carefully as reagents, who accept that different citizens will want different thresholds for selfhood and still find ways to live together under the same sky. The morning after that final night, you make coffee and open a message window. A friend on Mars has sent you a photo taken at dawn from the edge of a basin whose rocks were old before any language on Earth learned how to be surprised. The light is thin and reckless. The caption is small. When are you coming? You look at the ship's schedule. There is a transport in 9 months, a stately cruise with windows big enough to frame a moving Sunday. You look at the foundry's availability. 2 years. If you begin your registry now, you look at your mother's calendar, the scribbles of hospital visits, the good days and bad days. You choose, and whatever you choose, you will be right. If you ride in a ship, you will own the long arc and wake to skies that your bones have earned. If you choose the foundry, you will sleep and open your eyes beneath a new sun with the ancient numbers still warm in your mouth. Neither will have broken the world. Both will have honored it. The book is over, but the building is not. The wall we met was not a prohibition. It was an invitation to sufficiency. We went looking for instant and found instead a better promise, that distance can be made gentle without betrayal, that identity can be held without being frozen, that cause and effect can stay married while we court the stars. One day, on a basalt plain, a person will raise a gloved hand and cover with a fingertip an ember hanging in a different sky. They will smile, not because they have cheated, but because their species learned how to be clever without cruelty. They will whisper the old question, not because they doubt the answer, but because some questions are prayers. And then, in a room whose lights are kinder than any we used to make, someone else will open her eyes, breathe Mars air that has been filtered and warmed and made hospitable by 1,000 patient machines, and she will laugh because, from the inside, it felt exactly like now.